Yeah.
So, bruchim habaim, bruchot habaot, and very well, happy to welcome you all. And not all of you have met Stephen Scher, so I'm going to just welcome you, Stephen. Stephen is the new, what's your title?
Membership manager.
Membership manager at RS, and so
He's doing great.
And
Thanks, Miriam.
according to Muriel, he's doing great. And this is a job that was very lovingly held and beautifully done by Catherine Fisher for many years. And she, I love taking credit for Catherine's amazing being in the world, although of course I really can't, but I had the pleasure of working with her at the very beginning of her Jewish career. So then she came to RS and the rest is history. And she made a space for Stephen to follow in her footsteps. And we're now joined by Fred and by Jeff and Stephanie. I love the small lowercase n between Jeff and Stephanie, and Ned is here as well. So Susan, if we could have the prayer for study so that we can begin with that and ground ourselves in the presence of one another, even as we sit in our own spaces. So let's put up with the cacophony of many voices at once, and then we will please all mute ourselves after we say the prayer, except when we're speaking. So just please ground yourselves before we dive into this prayer. Just take a moment. And now begin.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
And let's just have one voice reading the English. Fred, would you be willing to be our voice, please?
Sure. Blessed are you, Holy One, who has commanded us with the mitzvah to immerse ourselves in words of Torah.
Amen. So let's all mute ourselves, please. And the good news tonight is that I can see everybody's face and I can see everyone's screen. So if you will either raise your hand physically or with the little reactions, that will make it easy to call on you and recognize you. So our parsha tonight is Lech Lecha, and we are, many of us are very, very familiar with a beautiful song written by Debbie Friedman for this parsha. And we're going to end our time tonight by listening to a version of that song. So I just kind of want us to get ready for that, to know that we will end with music. And we're going to begin with the very first words of the parsha, which Susan is going to put up for us. And Lech Lecha is, we're beginning with chapter 12 of Genesis. And we, in the past, I've introduced you to Torah, which is the new translation and interpretation of the Torah, changing both God and all the patriarchs into female voices and female presence, and all the matriarchs into male presences. And we're going to use that alternative tonight as well. And the creator of Torah, Yael Kanarak, calls the Torah that we are used to Torah, the Torah of the singular male point of view. And she calls the work that she's developed Torah, the Torah from a feminist or female point of view, and that the core is Torah. And that's what we're aiming for, is a full understanding of the voices of the tradition beyond the issue of gender. But because our Torah is so gendered, her work challenges us to crack it open. We've talked about this before. I'm just bringing it up again tonight because we will take a look a little bit at Torah Ta, but we're going to start with Torah To. And Susan, I'm going to ask you to pull this up. Thank you. Great. So now we can at least see 3 full verses, both in English and Hebrew. And I'd like, because you're at the top of my screen, I'm going to ask Stephanie, if you're willing, to read the first 2 verses in English. So unmute yourself and be our
There we
reader.
go. Thank you. The Lord said to Abram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing.
Thank
like
you.
it.
And Jeff, would you continue and read verses 3 and 4? Or just
Sure.
3? Just 3. Start with 3.
I will bless those who bless you, and curse him that curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you.
Hesh, would you continue and read verse 4?
Abram went forth as the Lord had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran.
And David, would you read our final verse here?
Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot and all the wealth that they had amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in the land of Canaan.
Oh, all right. That last phrase we don't need right now.
Okay.
So Susan, thank you. Can you make it smaller so more can fit on the page or not? Probably not, because I
I
see your
can,
PDF.
because I have to move this out of my
All right,
way.
Then don't.
No, I can do
oh.
it.
Oh, if you can. Oh, awesome. 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 Okay. All right. Let's start with the very top. Oh, you are the best. Fabulous. Can everyone read it, even though it's smaller? I hope you can read it. Okay. So I am going to ask you, many of you have read this many times, and for some of you, you're reading it for the first time tonight. And I would just love to hear from you about what you heard as your compatriots read these words, something you hadn't heard before, something that surprised you. And now I realize, because of the text being on the page, I can't see everybody. And so, yes, so help me by raising your hands, Fred. And then Hesh.
Hi, Rabbi. So interesting. I think I like coming to this, these Torah queries with a queer lens. And what I get that's really positive from this is, as a queer person growing up in the Midwest, I feel like I almost took these words, like I had to go forth from my native land to go to a place that was more me. And that at that time was I moved right from Ohio to New York City. So I think I can relate to what's happening in this part of the Torah. I just wanted to talk about that. I think, and I do think as queer people, a lot of times we do need to leave to be who we are.
Thank you, Fred. Hesh, you had your hand up, but you have to unmute.
No, I was just going to suggest, I don't know if on your screen, but if you go to the right edge of the Sepharia, you can move, if you get an arrow that you can move to the left, because if you move it to the left, you get more of a view of the folks who are on this call.
Ah, good thinking. All right, I bet I can do that. Yep. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Hesh. All right. So any other hands up among my friends here?
I have a couple thoughts.
Okay, Susan and then Eve and then Ned. Susan.
In verse 4 and 5, it says Abram left with Lot. And in 5, I'm very troubled by the portion that says, and the persons that they had acquired. That part's very troubling.
Tell me why it's troubling.
It's treating people like property.
Ah, okay. All right, so I know that Eve and Ned have your hands up, but I'm going to respond to Susan and then call on you if that's okay. Just because this is a verse that also troubled the rabbis. And I love the word troubled because of the wonderful Negro spiritual trouble the waters. God's going to trouble the waters. So here, the trouble here is, what does that mean? The persons they acquired in Haran. And one of the primary rabbinic interpretations is those that they had, that Avram and Sarai had brought towards the one God, that they were already, they weren't out there proselytizing, but that by the way they lived and the example that they set, others came to them to inquire, how does one become a Jew? How does one become like you? And so that it wasn't just their family and those who were related, like Lot, but others who said, we want to cast our lot with you. They didn't even call them Jews yet, but that's the way the rabbis wanted to interpret it, as opposed to actually owning other people. So just to kind of plant that as a possibility, as one interpretation that's been repeated for thousands of years. So Eve and then Ned.
Actually, Susan said what I was going to say.
Oh, wow. Okay. Great minds. Ned.
Yeah, so I wanted to pick up on what Fred was saying, that when we talk about go forth from your native land, it doesn't have to be a physical place. I don't think it can be more, it can be more spiritual. It can be a journey. I mean, I was born and raised in this region. I haven't gone very far geographically, but I mean, at a certain point, when I was around 30 or so, that's when I was dealing with my coming out, and I got late. I was not particularly out in my first career when I was working in computer science, and then I came out, and all kinds of stuff was happening. End result was, of course, I went back to school, graduate school, and I went for a degree in social work, and you don't escape going to school for social work without doing a lot of self-exploration and self-reflection. And so I think that was really my journey to really feel that I was in a place that felt more like home.
Thank you. Thank you. Ellen.
So I like the definition of Lech Lecha as going to yourself, going in yourself. And I think that picks up on what Ned and Fred were saying, that it doesn't have to be a journey, an outward journey. It can also be an inward journey to discover who you are into greater authenticity. So that's how I like to look at it, through a queer lens.
Thank you. So I've mentioned this book before, and that is very much what the authors of the chapter for this parsha speak about, really, that looking at this Torah portion, both through a queer lens and through a spiritual lens, that we see Lech Lecha as going forth. And the fact that the rabbis do this, that it's Lech Lecha me'artzecha, from your land. And it can be a physical place, but it also can be where you are born. What is the land that you are upon? So Lech Lecha me'artzecha, and then it says Umimoladecha, from the place where you were born. So both there's this sense of your land, and that could be the same place where you were born, or it could not. Perhaps you've already moved. But in this case, Avram is your land, from the place where you were born. And then it gets even more specific. Mi beit avicha, and from your father's house. And one of the things we're going to see, because we're going to look in a minute at the Torah, the idea of your mother's house. And many years ago, and I was going to contact her today, but didn't have the opportunity, a wonderful interpreter of Torah named Penina Edelman wrote a song, and the first verse in English was "Go forth from your father's house to the land that I will show you." And then, it was a Lech Lecha song. And then the next verse was "Go forth from your mother's house." So for some of us, our mother's house and our father's house are one and the same. For others of us, they're two different houses. But here we're speaking in metaphor to some extent. So the place that raised us perhaps with certain expectations. So this feels in many ways like a very queer text, in that we have to make our own journey. But I think it's true for every individual, that every one of us has to go forth. And of course, part of the challenge of this for us as contemporary Jews is reading this very first line. Vayomer Adonai el Avram. So God is the one who's giving this push. And do we feel that it's a push from God? And each of us has a different theology. Do we feel that it's a push or an invitation from the universe to go forth? What sends us forth? Our sense of discomfort, our sense of possibility, our sense of this space in which I've grown has become too narrow for me. And then of course, as many of us know, can you go home again? So did I see a hand, Heshi?
Oh,
No.
I was just going to say, for me, it's all three.
It's all three.
It's all three.
So say something more about that.
Well, it's possibility. Going towards the sun, going towards what's possible in your life, and moving from A to B because you're not liking your situation. If you're fearful, if you're not being all that you can be, then you can choose to stay in that place, or you could move. You could go towards something different, something more fulfilling, I don't want to say better, different, more fulfilling. And so you go look at what's possible in your life, what you can do. And then the third, I forget the third, but the third was possibility, fear. And what was the third, Sue?
Well, it's interesting when you said the third, I was actually thinking about from your land, from your birthplace, from your parents' house.
So it's all three. So from your land, whether you move away from your city, from your house, moving out, being on your own, or moving from your land, from your house, your land, and yeah. So
I want, and Fred, I'm going to call on you next, but you know what? I'm going to call on you now, Fred.
It's interesting. I started, as you were throwing out those ideas. I think I was reflecting back and growing up in Cleveland and Northern Ohio and we're talking about I was in college in the 80s. What brought me into New York City was the level of homophobia that I experienced traumatically in Ohio. And New York City was like, I guess, the Jerusalem of queerness. It was either that or San Francisco, but I didn't even think about San Francisco. But and so I'm thankful. In a way, I'm thankful because I feel like I have grown, and I've grown in ways that I wouldn't have had I not made that move. So, and I don't know what spark it is, if it's a divine spark, but something brought me to New York, and then I ultimately met my husband Craig, and all these really wonderful, positive things happened.
Thank you. Jeff or Steph? Who put your hand up?
I think we both did. This is a little shift. There are 2 points. I didn't understand in number 3, I will bless those who bless you and curse him that curses you. Versus, and curse those that curse you. That struck me kind of curious, that language. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Rabbi Kuhn has always said this is his favorite parsha. I don't remember why, but every year he would always say Lech Lecha was his favorite portion.
So I love your question, and I want to go back to it, but I want to hear from Wesley first, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking about in my copy of the text, it has language around, like, in this command, it's talking about creating a community of people and how you're going forth into community. And I was thinking back to, like, the fact that it was recently National Coming Out Day, and what coming out means in the context of saying I'm coming out into community rather than like I'm coming out specific, like, to anyone in particular, and community as a source of like social and material support for people. And I think that's one of the things that's talked about here.
Oh, lovely. So that actually leads exactly into what I was going to say, which is the fact that the way the text reads here, it says that God will show Avram the land. So go forth from your native land, from your father's house, from your birthplace, to the land that I will show you. And then I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And then it goes on to this challenging part, problematic for some perhaps, that Jeff brought up. But what I'd like to offer to us is the idea of, and I hinted at this before, but I really want to underscore it, that in this text, it's very clearly this patriarchal God who is saying, I'm going to take you out, and then I'm going to take care of you. But what Wesley has just suggested is who really welcomes us. And for each of us, and this is not a course on theology, but we have a very wide range of ideas of what God is in our lives. And I think in the context of Torah Queeries, that's a real reminder that we have a wide diversity of ideas about holiness, about the sacred, about the source of power in our lives and in our worlds. And even from the very personal example that Fred has shared with us, that Fred went forth to find a place of safety and comfort and acceptance. And it wasn't all that simple. I'm sure there were enormous challenges, and it took you a while to meet Craig. It didn't happen right away. And you both had to grow into the relationship. And for many of us, that's part of how the divine works for us and with us, even in the hard times. So that God is not this, is for some of us an outside force, but for many of us an inside force. So even as Ellen said, well, Ellen and Susan, I think both, about this being very much go to yourself. So what is the role of the individual here? And who, none of you have mentioned the fact that this guy who is the focus of this story is named just Avram. You're already anticipating the next text we're going to look at, which is how this person gets a name change. And so here is this. Now I want to suggest to each of us how we own this story, because part of reading the Torah through a queer lens for me is saying, what stories can I embrace and welcome and perhaps tweak so that they have real resonance for me, whether they're stories about people who seem to be good and effective and make good choices, or stories about people who stumble and fall. And where am I vis-a-vis larger powers in this story? And for some of us, this becomes very clear, that we thought that God was this way and God always is this way. But part of the challenge for me of reading these texts through contemporary eyes, through progressive Jewish eyes, whether we want to call it reform or not, and through the eyes of living in this very complicated world we live in, through our own eyes as queer and allies, as queer folks and allies, and in a way, wherever we identify ourselves on the many spectra that we operate in terms of our connection to Judaism or any other tradition, our connection to the divine, our connection to each other, and realizing that we are doing this in the context of community. So anyone want to jump in at this point before we look at another part of the text? Oh, I didn't really address the issue of curse. So that's also another big opportunity for us. But the idea also of we're never going to be loved by everyone. There are always going to be people who we feel put stumbling blocks in front of us or in front of themselves. What is curse for us? And so it's being presented here. So God says here, the God of the text, I'm going to take care of those who are good to you. And don't worry, I will help remove those who provide stumbling blocks. I'll help remove those from your path. And all of us have had stories like that. In a way, the story that Ned shared about finding obstacles in his former profession and choosing a new profession where there would be more open doors, where there would be fewer stumbling blocks, where there would be, as one of my friends says, blessings that are waiting around the corner. If we can only keep going, the blessing it has been waiting for us around the corner. And it sounds like there were some aspects of your preparation to be a social worker, Ned, that was not necessarily, maybe it was a blessing in disguise, so to speak, but insights and opportunities that you didn't know waited for you. And so, and for some of us, it's just a way of thinking about the world. Do we go through the world thinking there might be a blessing around the corner? Or do we go through the world thinking, oy vey, what's next? What's the next, thing that's going to happen? Look where we are in COVID. It's just going to get worse. I haven't been able to get the booster, therefore, blah, blah, blah. So whatever it is, we all have these. And And all of us are oriented in a certain way. And how do we change that orientation to, or acknowledge that orientation so that we can hear this invitation to go forth? So I don't see any hands. I think I'm going to ask Susan to scroll down to the next part. Let's just look at this Torata for a minute. So the Torata, as I said, puts this in the feminine, and it's a pretty straightforward text. So what you see right away is that the names have been changed. And but it sounds a little different when we read it. I'm going to read it just quickly. So first of all, God is renamed instead of Jehovah or Adonai, it's Tehovah. And Tehovah said to Em Ramah, and we're going to find out what Em Ramah, this is instead of Abraham. Tehovah said to Em Ramah, leave your country, your birthplace, and your mother's home to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those that curse you, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed. And Emramah went as Jehovah had spoken to her, and Lotah went with her. And Emramah was 75 years old when she went out of Haran. And Emramah took Sar, her husband, and Lotah, her niece, and all their belongings that they had gathered, and the souls that they had acquired in Haran. And they went out to go to the land of Canaan. Into the land of Canaan they came. So here it's mostly just a simple change of gender, but I'm wondering if anything struck you as I read those words. Ned. Ned and then Ellen.
Yeah,
Fred.
so the very first thing that struck me, I'm puzzled, is why did they, I mean, I get, the switching, I guess, of, the male names to female names and vice versa, but why Canaan? Why did Canaan become Canaan now? What is,
Well, and
what
I
is
have
happening
to
there?
be honest, I need to ask Yael about that. So I don't immediately know the answer. Sorry. Okay,
Okay.
Ellen and then Fred, but I will ask.
Tell me next time.
Okay.
So this totally caught me by surprise. I didn't really understand that it would be meaningful for me to switch genders. And yet I just found this so powerful because in the Amidah, not in the Reform prayer book, but in other prayer books, it always describes Sarah as God being her guardian. And here she has agency. She's the one going forth. And it just struck me as so powerful. It just really surprised me, my strong reaction to it. But I really loved it.
Thank you. All right, well, I think I've mentioned before, there is a website called Beit Torata that has many texts on it. That's where I got this. And you can look it up, and maybe Susan or someone will put it in the chat. It's beitorata.org. But it may answer the question about Kanana, but I'm gonna ask Yael about that also. Fred, and then Jeff and Stephanie. Fred.
So I find this, it's funny because I don't think I've ever seen this Tarata before, and I find it to be incredible and just women powerful, and that's really wonderful. I do have a thought now, though. I do run a Queers and Allies club in my school. Actually, it's a committee. And I wonder if eventually there's going to be some version that is gender fluid and not just looking male and female, but looking beyond that. at the span of gender identity.
Well, that's, Yael, the creator of this, is very clear that this is a step towards a totally inclusive Torah. And in fact, if you go on the website, you'll see she's a calligrapher as well as a translator, and she's an artist at heart. And what she does is she brings the two texts together. So she'll have the traditional text in Hebrew over here in kind of a circle. I'm going to do a poor job here. And then the feminized, so to speak, text, and then brings them together. And the overlap is really powerful because there it is. And saying, we've got to go beyond this binary. So that's the intention, but that this is a necessary step. So thank you for asking. And Jeff and Stephanie, and then Susan.
So in the portion that I read in number 3 earlier, and in this paragraph, it reads like I thought number 3 would, but it didn't. If you read, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those that curse you, where I read, and I will curse him that curses you.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the Hebrew, the original, and the whole idea of plural and singular. I think that there is often a question about Kri and Katif. Some of you know, Jerry, my #1 Hebrew scholar, isn't here this week, but that often there is things are written in the Torah but are read differently. So I'm just going to offer that as a possible response to your very good question, Jeff. But I can also look that one up for you.
Not a problem.
Susan.
So I'm looking at the same place I looked before. Now it says, and the souls that they had acquired, which seems to lean a little more toward what you said earlier.
Yeah, and the Hebrew is the word nephesh, which is soul or spirit. So, but it usually referring to a person as opposed to individual. The Hebrew is v'chasu et hanefesh asher asu. The whole idea of making souls. That's why the rabbis came up with this interpretation. What does it mean to make a soul? It means to welcome someone into a circle of care. So Wesley, Fred, and Ned. Wesley.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I have an interpretation here from Rabbi that says that the reason it says I will bless those and then him is to reassure that the admirers will be many and the detractors few, in the face of what might otherwise seem like a monumental thing to do.
Wow. What a lovely aspiration. May your supporters be many and your detractors few. Wow. We should have that as part as any inauguration of any leader. Thank you. Okay, who did I say was next? I've lost my order. Was it Ned? Oh, you forgot to take your hand down. All right, any other hands? All right, I want to go on to the other text that I've got here before so Susan, thank you very much. So now we're looking at verse 17. And again, Muriel, would you be read verses 1 and 2, please?
When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai, walk in my ways and be blameless.
Yeah, that A somehow floated in there by accident.
Walk in my ways.
Thank you.
Blameless.
Thank you.
I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous.
Thank you. So here, where we've got Avram, who the first one was, he was in his 70s, right? He was 75 years old. So now 99. We all know that the years in the Torah are not always, we're not always able to correlate them with our understanding of time. But it is interesting to think of a 75-year-old person being told to leave his or her land. And now here, a 99-year-old person, which for us is quite aged. And finally, God's saying, okay, I'm going to make you really numerous. And meanwhile, we have a whole nother story that we're not looking at right now, where Avram says, I'm 99 and I've never had any kids. Hey, God, what are you up to? That's in another verse that we're not looking at, but the 99 part is intense. And let's continue. Rachel, would you be willing to read verse 3 through 7?
Cool. Can you scroll down for me so I can see? Okay. Abram threw himself on his face, and God spoke to him further. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the father of a multitude of nations, and you shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile and make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and to your offspring to come.
Thank you. So what's going on here? Who has noticed something that they might not have seen before or that they're seeing for the first time in these verses? That Rachel read for us. So we've got a name change going on here. And God, part of the name change is making this covenant, this brit, this arrangement, this deep connection. And here's what, and the nature of this covenant is clear. I'm making this covenant not just between you and me, but it's between you and those who will come. There will be many who will come from you. Even though you're 99 years old, you will be the father of a multitude, and you're going to have a name change, and your name Avram, which means father of many, is now Avraham, for the father of even more, a real true multitude. And you're going to be very fertile. Nations will come from you, and kings shall come forth from you. And the covenant, this last line, is not between me and you, not only, but also between your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant. And the phrase here is Brit Olam. Many of you know this word Olam, Leolam Va'ed, forever and ever, and Brit meaning covenant. Here, this everlasting covenant throughout the ages. I'm going to be God to you and to your offspring to come. I'd like to now read it in the Torah. So if Susan, you wouldn't mind bringing that up, because it's going to sound somewhat different, but now you're kind of prepared because we did it before with the other part. And when Ramah was 99 years old, Jehovah appeared to Ramah and said to her, I am Elah Shaddai. Walk before me and be wholesome, and I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you greatly. And Ramah fell on her face, and Elohim talked with her, saying, as for me, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the mother of a multitude of nations. No more will your name be called Em Ramah, but your name will be Em Rahama, for I've made you the mother of a multitude of nations. And I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and queens will come from you, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your fruit of the womb after you throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be an Elohim to you and to your fruit of the womb after you. So I'm wondering, since Ellen spoke up last time about how the change affected her, I wonder if you, Ellen, or anyone else heard something this time that either resonated with you or made you say, whoa, what's going on here? Muriel.
Well, I love that, the idea of being the mother of a multitude of nations. In fact, that's more meaningful to me. It might be sexist of me, but the idea the mother gives birth, and I like this.
Okay.
It feels right. Something.
It feels right. Anyone else? Rachel.
I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more about the fell on your face piece that's for both of these, because the conversation or what God has to say is so shocking that it feels like you would fall on your face afterwards and not before.
Oh, what a wonderful insight. So, so it's after really the first moment when God introduces God's self to Emramah or to Avram and says, this is who I am. Walk before me. And this is such a wonderful translation. And be wholesome. So what is being built on here is walk in my ways and be blameless. But here as blameless as opposed to wholesome, and be whole. I'm looking at the Hebrew. Ani El Shaddai, titalech lefanai, v'haye tamim. So tamim is in both translations are correct. But the idea of ish tam, it's one who's almost innocent. It's one who is there's a freshness about this. So I'm God, walk with me and you will be made fresh. Now, if we've got Abraham or Avram or Emramah, at whatever age, this is not a child. This is an adult. This is an adult with many years of life experience. And walk with me, and in a way, what, for each of us, what would it mean to kind of have a clear path to be tamim, to be fresh, to be without blame, to be wholesome? If someone says, if you walk with me, we're going to be, my presence with you, my accompaniment of you is going to make you more wholesome. All that stuff that you're carrying, it's going to melt away. I am El Shaddai, walk with me and be wholesome. And I'm going to we're going to have a connection here. And I will multiply you greatly. Now, obviously, multiply you, make you fruitful, can be interpreted in many ways. It's not only, and we see this in the Torah more than once, it's not only about having children. It's not only about biological fruitfulness. In fact, the one person in Jewish tradition who is called Em B'Yisrael, a mother in Israel. I wonder if anyone knows who that is. It's Deborah. She is called Em B'Yisrael, and we have no record of her having children or even being partnered. It's really unclear about her life, but she is called Em B'Yisrael because she is a leader in Israel. She's a warrior, a leader. And some of you, I bet, in your travels to Israel have gone and visited the area that they say is where Deborah, the tree under which Deborah actually sat. You've got to have great, if you go to Israel, you should have great tour guides who tell you stuff like that. And you wonder, has the tree been there for thousands of years? But, you know, wow, what a thought. So here is Em B'Yisrael, and we are really invited into that. So Rachel's wonderful question. So why is Abraham falling on his face before? Well, it's like, whoa. And I think for us, for each of us, it's what a wonderful invitation to think about if someone came to us, you know, a person, or if we had a dream. I mean, the idea of actually, oh my gosh, I can't even stand up as I'm getting this information. I need to honor the power of this moment. And that's what Avram is doing. So then it doesn't even say, and Avram got back up. So, I mean, so, you know, if we're making this into our own little drama, what happens? You know, did Avram get back up? Did Emrama, was she prostrate on the ground and Elohim talked with her? Then we get an idea of, you know, how do we think of the Holy One? Is the Holy One bending down to speak to the matriarch, to the patriarch? So I am watching the time, and I really want to end with this Debbie Friedman musical piece, which Susan is going to help us put up. But I think it's about a five minutes. So I think there's some closing comments from you. I would love to hear.
I know Heshi and David have their hands up.
Oh, then please, thank you, Hesh.
So I'm curious, when you talk about covenant between Avram and God, you're talking about, I mean, in circumcision, you know, you're going to be circumcised, Abraham, you're going to be circumcised, your name's going to be Abraham, or your name's going to be Abraham, and you're going to be circumcised, and all generations will be circumcised. What does that look like in a female Abraham?
Aha, wonderful question. So you can imagine that the women who are working on this really struggled with that, because female circumcision is really not parallel to male circumcision.
No.
And the whole idea of a sign in the flesh, and what's behind that. And I'm going to have to tell you that I would really want Yael to sit and talk with us, or she actually has a partner who's been working with her, a wonderful, wonderful Israeli woman. And I think she may have a piece, she may have written a blog piece about this, which now I'm going to go look up, and I will bring it to you in 2 weeks. Or actually, if I find it sooner, I can send it out, but it would be more fun to present it to the whole class as opposed to just sending it out. So I love your question, and you're totally right that part of that, we really, I don't know if the right word is cherry picked. We looked at only 2 small parts of a very, very rich portion, and that indeed circumcision is another focal point of this particular portion. And it's really complicated for us. I think it's been complicated complicated for many, many generations. But I think we look at it with a range of particular questions from our heightened understanding of gender and the fact that we're part of a queer community. And we are very sensitive about our bodies and the differences between our bodies and how we treat our bodies and how we mistreat our bodies. So I'm going to leave that out there, but you've given me some wonderful things to look up and to pursue in the next 2 weeks before I see you again. And I would love Susan to put up this piece, and it may run beyond our 8 o'clock time. And obviously, as you need to jump off, you will.